Hello and welcome to this edition of the ngrok Developer Roundtable. I'm your host, Scott McAllister, Principal Developer Advocate here at ngrok. I'm joined today by Jack Britton. Jack, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Yeah. Hi, I'm Jack. I am the PLG lead at ngrok. That PLG translates to product-led growth, which basically just means I spend my days talking to a lot of our customers, understanding how they are using ngrok as a product and what they are using ngrok to unlock for them in their development workflows and environments. And yeah, it's a really great gig because I get to talk to a lot of our awesome users.
Indeed, and he has a lot of great stories. We originally had Deshaun Carter set to be upon our show today. He may still show up. Sean and I are both in the Pacific Northwest of the United States today, and we had a little bit of a weather issue last night, something called a bomb cyclone, and it basically took out power for much of the area. So Sean is still trying to get to the show. If Sean arrives, we will definitely have him join us and talk with us as well, but appreciate Jack showing up at pinch hitting for Deshaun at this time. So yeah, Jack, you're a lifesaver. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be a warm-up act. I'll keep the seat warm for Deshaun.
You'll get the crowd going, and we'll get some energy, and then again, and he'll knock it down, kind of thing.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so to level set for everybody, what is ngrok? ngrok is a universal gateway platform for developers. It's a tool that allows you to get either your local development or production environments online quickly and securely. It originated as a developer tool for testing out code running on your local machine. Our founder needed a way to test code that is interacting with webhooks. So the easiest thing to do was he created an application to create an easy way of getting online where you just say ngrok, you give it a protocol, HTTP, whatever you're running on, and then the port. And you specify a domain or a URL, and that gives you an address that allows anyone to be able to get to your service running on your machine. And as your traffic is passing through the ngrok platform, that avails you to a variety of features, things like authentication, load balancing, IP restrictions. You can even observe the traffic that's coming through and pump it into something like Datadog. And that way you can have essentially a gateway that's running in front of your applications or your APIs or your networks, or in between your tool and maybe a customer network. And so ngrok is that tool that can provide that universal gateway for you. As an announcement, there's a lot of great content coming out from our ngrok team these days. We have another show called Office Hours. It's a chance for you to come and ask your questions. If you have any concerns or issues with running in the ngrok platform, or if you just want to know things in general, come to Office Hours. My coworker Joel Hands runs that program. He does a great job. He answers either your questions live, or you can submit questions beforehand, and he can prepare demos and tutorials for you beforehand so that you can see them during the show. The next episode is on December 13th at 9:30 a.m. You can register at that QR code there. And that runs essentially monthly. And then also our next Developer Roundtable is going to be in January, on January 29th at 9 a.m. We are investigating some new platforms, and so our registration link will come out in the following weeks. So we're not going to have that today. We'll send that out here in the next few weeks, probably, hopefully, before the holidays, when we have settled on a new platform. So hopefully we can find a good platform for everyone. But that'll be on January 29th. We're going to talk to Micah Silverman from Sneak about API security. That should be a good one for you folks, for all of you operating APIs and making sure that they stay secure. And so at this portion of the show, we generally go into the blog and talk about various announcements that have happened in the blog. What I want to do is I'm going to talk about one of the blog posts that came out recently that talked about a product update. But if you don't want to wait for Developer Roundtable episodes to get these updates, you can head over to the ngrok.com/blog and subscribe and make sure that you have those updates coming to you as they happen. These updates are things that either happen to product updates on our platform itself, or they could be some experiences that our engineers have. A popular post these days is one that from one of our data engineers talking about how we set up our data infrastructure, right? It's a fantastic blog talking about how we are doing things here at ngrok. And one of those announcements that I wanted to make and talk about today was talking about goodbye tunnels and hello agent endpoints. Essentially, what we're doing is we're making a wholesale change on how we do things here at ngrok, how things are named, and going from essentially using the object of tunnels and moving into something called endpoints. It's a change that it's happening through our config files that you're using. Our config files are changing from version 1 to version 2, and a lot of those changes are happening. What I want to do actually is I'm going to park that thought and park that conversation and hopefully talk about it more when Deshaun, or if Deshaun arrives. That way I can talk to Jack about some cool stories that are happening inside of ngrok these days. So I'm going to stop here. Right. Okay. And see here. Jack, tell me, what are some of you look at, as you said, you get to talk to customers and find out some of the cool stories that they're doing. You want to talk about some of the things that you've heard lately that are just mind-blowing of what folks are doing with ngrok?
Absolutely. As you mentioned up top, there's a really strong use case that a lot of our users will use ngrok for, which is exposing their home projects and their local, the things that they have running on their local machine to the public internet, being able to apply some authentication and security to make sure that their project stays safe. But we have a lot more, as you mentioned, functionality than that, that allows users to really configure their apps, APIs, services that they have running on production networks in really cool ways. So I've got a couple of different options here. I'll start off with one that I find personally kind of wild and interesting because I live in a city and I don't have a car. But you might find yourself asking, how can I communicate better with my favorite car wash? At least, maybe I find that kind of interesting, but one of our customers is the answer to that. I'm not going to mention any of the customers by name just because, we didn't get sort of pre-clearance, but this customer is what they do is they use ngrok to connect with point of sale solutions within car washes. So think like all of the subscription management services that a car wash will have to be able to track how many times you've gone through the car wash, to be able to track sort of customer loyalty programs, things like that, right? And what this customer uses ngrok to do is they ingress into their databases that they have on their network, and then extracts tons of intelligence back to a BI tool that they sell to the car washes to give them more intelligence on how their customers are using their car wash, how much more they could get out of potentially running a sale or selling memberships and subscriptions, things like that. Apparently, I've been told that this has become a lot more popular among car washes since sort of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it was not known to me, so I found it interesting, but I'll get a little bit into sort of like how it works, or at least how our customer uses ngrok here. So depending on the point of sale, there may be some easily accessible cloud database or API that they can connect to. But most of the time, as I'm sure you can imagine, car washes are running on ancient software and legacy systems that they still have to ingress into if they want to sell their software, right? So the most common setups they encounter are old Firebird databases. I don't know if you remember Firebird, but that obviously,
Whoa.
yeah, I know, pretty wild.
Yeah, that's like, how you like hear a word and it hits that really dusty part of your brain. You're like,
Yes.
oh, I haven't heard that in a long time. Something like, Cold Fusion, right? In
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
programming, right? And
Or
so
like
Firebird,
database.
wow,
Yeah.
okay.
So they have to ingress, they have to hit a lot of default port 3050, like which is for Firebird. Sometimes it's even more basic than that. Sometimes it's just a Dell machine sitting in the back office of a car wash in Florida, like our customer told us, that they have to be able to remote into that Dell machine to be able to extract the usage data from that car wash to be able to give them, a tool that they can use. And so what they will do is they'll remote, or they'll SSH into the servers on those machines. They will install an ngrok YAML config. Once they've set that up, they'll set up a TCP address and a port combination as a service. With IP restrictions applied, so that they are the only ones that they can then, use to ingress there. And they'll configure like a TCP tunnel to expose that specific database port to certain IPs. And then they will test the config file to make sure that they can connect. And then once they've kind of set that up as a service, they can continue to run it as a service using whatever software they want. Originally, it's funny, they were using NSSM, which stands for Non-Sucking Service Manager, to set up the ngrok endpoint as a service. But they eventually, we worked with them early on. They eventually moved over to using just an ngrok agent subcommand to set up the endpoint as a service, which for anybody who's interested, you can run ngrok service install and then add your config as a tag to the end of that command just from the CLI. So that's one example of how, we're powering the BI software that helps manage car wash subscriptions, which I thought was cool.
And so this isn't for like those brand new car wash, because so my father-in-law is obsessed with getting his car washed. So when you said car wash systems, I instantly thought of my father-in-law and his packet of tickets that he has sitting in his car. When I borrow his car, he always hands me a ticket to say, make sure you get it washed. And so I'm like, okay, I'll make sure I get it washed. So I was never really introduced to that ecosystem until I met him, because I'd always grown up, you pulled your car into a car wash and like put coins in a thing and sprayed it off and that was it, or you did it in your driveway. I mean, it was usually how I wash cars. And so thinking of these like fully automated, like what people do, the different services they make. And so you're saying that ngrok is the company, that it's a software company that powers these different car washes, right?
It'll power the subscription management software for those car washes. The car washes still do what they do, but ngrok is being used as kind of the interface to connect in, grab all the usage data from that car wash, send it to a tool that the customer can then use, kind of like a Tableau or a BI service, to then how many times did Scott use my car wash in the last 12 weeks? Let's offer him a discount plan or a subscription a subscription to this car wash.
Oh wow. Okay. So yeah, this software definitely has my father-in-law in it, for sure. And all of his traffic, or would you call it? I guess you call that traffic into a car wash and getting his car washed repeatedly.
Yeah.
His cars are always immaculate. So
there you go. So he could probably be making some money if he has a subscription service.
Right?
But you know how everything is moving to a subscription service, and now car washes have finally entered the fold. But
oh yeah, and he is on board. So definitely, and he's not the only one. I definitely, when I go visit him, in the area of the country where he lives, it's in Utah, and it just seems like there's a car wash on almost every corner. I think it's because it's dusty there, and so it just makes it so that people want to have that subscription. They know that they can go to a place. We're all habitual, right? We go there and we do our thing. Interesting. Okay, that's very cool.
So that's one example, which typically. Oh, hey, we have a question from Marcelo. All right.
Oh yeah. Yes. Marcelo, there is a link where folks can join these roundtables for sure. As I mentioned in the announcements, the one on API security, we are still working out some details on what platform we're going to be running on when we go there. And so we don't have a link today. We will have a link coming soon, and you'll receive one of those emails. And I promise the times will be correct on that email. Not only in the email, but in the confirmation email you get from Zoom. I think that was the big issue, was the fact that the email that sent out said 9 a.m. The confirmation email said 12 p.m. and then I changed it to 9 p.m. in my haste of changing time. So yes, I definitely, and we'll also be putting out that announcement on various social platforms. So it'll be on LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky, things like that. So you'll be able to find it in those places as well. Once we get that link out, we'll definitely be able to get it out to everyone there. So yeah, API security should be a great episode.
I've got
Cool.
more, just in case.
Please, Jack, tell me
Yeah.
more. So,
Right.
so car washes is not where I thought you were going to go. I
I
honestly
know.
didn't. I was that it was not on my bingo card for today.
That's right.
And my bingo card for today has been pretty random.
Yes,
So,
I can imagine with the
right,
bombs
I'm sitting in a
and
WeWork in
everything.
downtown Seattle. So,
Yeah, that's right.
um,
So
so
moving over into a different realm here. We mentioned up top sort of the traditional, the classic ngrok use case of exposing your local project. Maybe you've got sort of you've got a project that you're building, which you wanna demo sort of like a proof of concept of an app or a service that you're running locally on your machine to some of your coworkers or maybe just some friends. But what happens when you want to take that app and start, demoing it in terms of, or, move it to production in terms of you want to launch it in like a private beta? Or what happens if you want to actually turn this app that was previously, a homegrown service and you want to start actually moving it into, actually deploying it into production, right? So what does that look like? Well, this next example is an interesting use case where a customer of ours did exactly that. And I think it's particularly cool because they started out sort of using us in a more manual agent-based way to set up their app with new customers, but then they've started moving to more API-based solutions that are scalable now that they're moving into production. So this one of our customers, they build 3D modeling software that sits in the browser that allows you to basically take a bunch of 3D files. You input 3D files for a thing that you want to build, and it will turn your 3D files into like images and product videos for a product that you might want to sell. So like if you have like 3D files for like I don't know, let's say a water bottle or something. Let's say you're selling Stanley cups or something, right? And if you have a 3D file that you want to use to sort of say, hey, I'd like to turn this into a product image that I'm going to put on my website to sell my product. You can then use this software to input those files and it will turn out like rotating carousel images for you. It'll start building some of that like classic product images. It's cool. It's a cool product, obviously, like something I'm super interested in. My husband is a designer, so he uses this kind of software all the time, but he does it manually and this stuff does it for you. But
it manually takes forever, right?
it
Like
does. Yeah.
it's tedious. You got to make all the different angles of the thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to
And you
make
have to like
lots of different things.
render the software properly. You have to render the image properly. It's a whole mess, right?
Yeah.
But with this stuff, it automates a lot of that process. So this customer is in private beta right now, on track to fully deploy their product live in production with ngrok. But they also started out using ngrok as just part of their early demo local host kind of environment. So now that they're in private beta, what's really cool about this customer is that each time they want to set up a new customer, they spin up an EC2 instance for that new customer. And they tell ngrok to assign a specific endpoint to the EC2 for that, to grant that user app access. And so instead of the EC2 trying to tell the web front end of their product its IP, they just have it map itself to a predefined ngrok subdomain, and they've set up the front end of their app to know how to grab that ngrok subdomain. So rather than having this sort of be pushed from EC2, they actually just have their web front end listening constantly on ngrok for that domain. And then they say, oh, great, we have a new domain. Let's grant that user access because they have an EC2 instance, because we know based on the fact that we've configured an endpoint using ngrok. And so it's a really cool setup for sort of private beta access, because obviously this product requires users to input their files, and these 3D files are large. So every customer needs their own EC2 instance. And so they're using us to sort of do that provisioning process for new endpoints as new customers come on board. As I mentioned, it kind of started out pretty manually, where they would start up a new EC2 instance from their agent, and they would create ngrok endpoints from their agent. But now they're evaluating options to scale this to an API-based solution where they're actually they want to use ngrok as a tool to communicate that information to create those EC2 instances, as well as using EC2 to like connect endpoints to those instances, which is pretty cool. So
Wow, that is cool. Especially going in like the fact that like we're moving into this space of the world where we have software automating our the creation process essentially, right? Like it, and like you said, and so making that possible, making it easier for them to get those renders out to folks is awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the final
Tell
one
me
that
more. What's
I was gonna
next?
say I can keep going. So
Yeah,
the
please,
final one that
please.
the final one that I had planned was so we're actually using we've partnered with, or we are the provider for a nonprofit indigenous radio station in New Zealand that that is using us for a number of different use cases. This nonprofit indigenous radio station in New Zealand, they recently acquired some NVIDIA A100 Tensor Core GPUs to train algorithms to run natural language processing on their ancestral indigenous language archives to preserve and revitalize that language. So they basically they can do, because they have all these archives, they're a radio station, they have this huge database of audio that they can start to use NLP and machine learning on to actually understand, extract all the components of that language, and then start to use that for for preserving and revitalizing the language so that people won't forget it. Because I'm sure I'm sure they face a lot of struggles with that, right? The UN recently came out with a report that said 3/4 of the world's languages are at risk of going extinct. So, you can imagine that, for all these indigenous communities that want to preserve their language, this is like a new path forward, right? And so what this radio station is doing, because they were fortunate enough to build and train these algorithms to actually preserve their language, they are now actually they built their own production app, which is this digital platform that they are using ngrok to manage ingress into, similar to the one that I just talked about, right? With the rendering software, they're using, so this radio station is now using ngrok to manage customers accessing this digital platform, which will enable other indigenous language communities to develop their own speech recognition and natural language processing capabilities on that platform. So they can then provide their own audio files to start doing all this stuff. Which is just super cool to see that, ngrok is being used for something that's preserving language, all the way from car washes to preserving language to rendering software, which is, it's a very versatile platform.
It's amazing all the different spaces that ingress and gateway technology touches. And it's like, you think when you initially think ngrok, you initially think websites or APIs or webhooks or things, but it's so much more when you start realizing that all of those things are for organizations doing all of the work in the world today. Like you said, from language preservation to image rendering to, running car washes of all places. I mean, it's fantastic. So, that is awesome. That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Jack.
And you mentioned some webhooks, kind of more the bread and butter stuff, right? Like they actually they manage authentication APIs through webhook verification using ngrok. So they will manage that kind of OAuth access to their media repos, to their if you're logging into their digital platform, they manage all of that, and they verify that you're authenticated using using ngrok as well for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jack, I appreciate you coming in and sharing some of those stories with us today on the Developer Roundtable here at the as a last second change. So I appreciate you coming here and sharing those with us.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. We appreciate you all for coming today, and thank you for your patience through some of our technical struggles, human struggles, weather struggles that we had today. I think we're going to wrap for today, and we will definitely send some messages out for when our next episodes will be. We're going to get Deshaun on here so that we can talk to him about using the latest version of our software dependencies and our software projects. That's how I also want to tie in the blog post that we talked about before with the ngrok, the new version of the ngrok agent, which is going to be essentially moving from tunnels to endpoints. Will be essentially what we say, sunsetting the concept of tunnels and moving on to the idea of endpoints. Marcelo, thank you so much for coming today and being with us. Benjamin as well. We appreciate you all being here. And we look forward to having you all again next time. Thanks, y'all.